let me tell you about a book that isn't just another motivational self-help guide. This one is raw, it's gritty, and it comes straight from the heart of someone who's lived through some of the darkest and toughest moments a human can endure. The book is Can't Hurt Me, written by David Goggins, first released in December 2018. Now, if you've never heard of Goggins, buckle up, because his life story reads like a movie script, except it's all real. David Goggins is not your average author. He's a retired Navy SEAL, an Army Ranger, and an Air Force tactical air controller. That alone is impressive, but it doesn't even scratch the surface. Beyond his military career, Goggins became an ultra-endurance athlete, running 100-mile races, pushing his body and mind to limits most of us can't even imagine. But what makes him stand out isn't just his achievements, it's the journey he took to get there. He grew up in an abusive home, battled poverty, racism, obesity, and a learning disability. By all odds, life had stacked the deck against him. Yet he found a way not only to survive, but to turn that pain into fuel. So what is this book about? Can't Hurt Me is part memoir, part self-development guide. Goggins doesn't just tell his story, he challenges you to look at your own life and ask, what's holding me back? What excuses am I hiding behind? He introduces what he calls the 40% rule, which basically says that when your mind tells you you're done, you're only at about 40% of your potential. And the other 60%, that's where the magic happens, if you're willing to push through the discomfort. In today's world, where most of us are drowning in comfort, scrolling on our phones, chasing quick rewards, avoiding hard work, Goggins' message hits hard. He reminds us that resilience isn't built in ease, it's built in struggle. This book forces you to confront your own limits and question whether you've really tapped into your full capacity. It's not about comparing yourself to him, because let's be real, very few people will ever run 100 miles on broken legs like he did, but about learning from his mindset. It's about realizing that pain, fear, and doubt aren't stop signs. They're actually doorways to growth. And that's why this book matters today more than ever. In a world obsessed with shortcuts and comfort zones, Can't Hurt Me is like a punch of truth straight to the gut. It's not soft, it's not sugar-coated, it's brutally honest. But that's exactly why it's so powerful. It's a reminder that we are far stronger than we think, and that resilience, grit, and mental toughness are not gifts. You build them. So, whether you're a professional, an athlete, or just someone trying to get unstuck in life, Goggins' story pulls you in. And his lessons? They dare you to stop settling for average and to find out what you're really capable of. Now, before we move forward, take a moment to hit that subscribe button on the Mindful Brief and like this video. Why? Because your life can change starting right here, right now. Every insight from this book has the power to shift your mindset, to break through excuses, and to unlock strength you didn't even know you had. So don't just listen, commit to growing with us. And with that said, let's jump into Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. David Goggins didn't come into this world with strength, confidence, or a clear path. His story begins in Buffalo, New York, in a house that looked normal from the outside, but was anything but safe inside. His father, Toughness, owned a roller skating rink and had a reputation for being a hard-working businessman. But behind closed doors, he was abusive and violent. Every day, David, his brother, and his mother lived in fear of his temper. The sound of footsteps in the hallway could mean another beating. For a child, there's nothing more terrifying than realizing the person who is supposed to protect you is the one who hurts you the most. That kind of environment leaves scars, and not just physical ones. At school, life wasn't much better. Being one of the only black kids in a mostly white neighborhood meant that racism was part of his daily routine. Slurs, bullying, being told he didn't belong, it wore him down. On top of that, he struggled with a learning disability. Words and numbers on the page didn't come easy to him. Teachers thought he was lazy, classmates thought he was dumb, and soon enough, he started to believe it himself. Imagine that. You go home and face abuse, you go to school and feel like an outcast, and deep down you think you'll never be good enough. That was the world David Goggins grew up in. He wasn't building muscles or breaking records back then. He was just trying to survive. Every day was about making it through, about staying quiet enough not to set off his father, about holding in the anger and shame he carried. And yet, looking back, that brutal start was shaping something inside him. It wasn't strength, not yet. It was survival. But survival would one day turn into resilience. Eventually, his mother couldn't take it anymore. She found the courage to leave, and together they walked away from his father's house of violence. That escape was a turning point, but life didn't suddenly become easy. They had little money, starting over from scratch. David and his mom worked cleaning jobs just to get by. Poverty had replaced abuse, and struggle followed him like a shadow. He wasn't a warrior yet. He was a skinny, scared boy with no confidence, doing what he could to help his mom keep the lights on. What's striking about Goggins' story is that he doesn't hide these beginnings. Most people want to gloss over their darkest memories, but he lays them bare. Because the truth is, everyone has their version of a broken start. Maybe it's abuse, maybe it's doubt, maybe it's failure or fear. And if you're listening, you probably have your own scars too. Goggins wants us to see that those scars aren't there to hold us back. They can be fuel. They can be the start of something greater if you choose to face them instead of letting them define you. He often says pain is a teacher. For young David, it was a cruel teacher, showing up every single day, pounding into his life whether he wanted it or not. But over time, that pain started to carve something inside him. Think about lifting weights. The muscle only grows because it tears and repairs itself. Life was tearing him down, but in those tears, resilience was forming. He didn't know it at the time, but those early battles were preparing him for the wars he would one day fight within himself. When you imagine David Goggins now, running ultramarathons, breaking world records, pushing through hell weeks, you have to remember the scared little boy he used to be. A boy who hid in silence. A boy who thought he was worthless. That contrast is what makes his journey so powerful, because it shows that toughness isn't something you're born with. It's something you build brick by brick, scar by scar. And that's the message hidden in his broken beginning. Life will test you. It will hand you pain you don't deserve. It will convince you that you're not enough. But if you let that pain shape you instead of break you, it can become the foundation of greatness. Goggins' childhood didn't give him strength. It gave him suffering. And later, he learned that suffering could be turned into the most unshakable strength a person could ever know. So before you think of him as the toughest man alive, remember this part of the story. Remember the boy who came from nothing, who carried trauma, doubt, and fear. Because if he could rise from that darkness and create the man the world knows today, then the same possibility lives in you too. Your beginning doesn't decide your end, and sometimes the hardest starts create the strongest finishes. Life after leaving his father's house didn't get magically better for David Goggins. Yes, the abuse stopped, but poverty and self-doubt stuck around. He drifted through school, barely scraping by, and his confidence was at rock bottom. He wasn't a star athlete. He wasn't a standout student. In fact, he avoided challenges. The truth was, he had built a habit of hiding from life, doing just enough to get by and telling himself he wasn't capable of much more. By the time he became a young adult, that habit of hiding caught up with him. He found himself overweight, out of shape, and stuck in a dead-end job as a pest exterminator. Picture this. Every day, he'd wake up before sunrise, pull on a uniform that reeked of chemicals, and crawl under greasy restaurants to kill cockroaches. It was hot, filthy, and depressing work. And the whole time, he was eating fast food, drinking milkshakes, and watching his body grow heavier. At his peak weight, he was over 300 pounds. That's the thing about excuses. They build up quietly until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. Goggins hit that moment hard. One night, he walked into his bathroom, looked into the mirror, and had to face the ugly truth. He wasn't just overweight. He wasn't just unhappy. He had become a man who ran from challenges, who let fear and comfort control his life. And in that mirror, he saw every excuse he had ever made reflected back at him. That mirror moment became the first step of his transformation. He called it the accountability mirror. Instead of turning away from his reflection, he forced himself to look into it every single day and confront his failures. He would write down sticky notes with the harsh truth, statements like, "You're fat, you're lazy, you're not smart." It wasn't about shaming himself. It was about stripping away the lies, forcing himself to see reality as it was, not as he wished it to be. Because you can't change your life until you're brutally honest about where you're standing right now. But honesty alone wasn't enough. He needed a goal big enough to rip him out of his comfort zone. And that's when he saw a TV program about Navy SEALs. These men were the toughest of the tough, enduring brutal training, surviving where most people would quit. Something inside Goggins sparked. He wanted that. He wanted to become one of them. But there was a problem. Actually, there were a lot of problems. He was overweight. He was out of shape. And when he called a recruiter, he found out he had just 3 months to lose more than 100 pounds if he wanted a chance to even qualify for training. Most people would have laughed at that challenge and walked away. But for Goggins, this was life or death. He was sick of being the man in the mirror who ran from life. So he made a decision. For 3 months, he would go all in. No shortcuts, no excuses, no going back. And that's exactly what he did. He woke up early, forced himself into grueling workouts, and cut every ounce of junk food out of his diet. He went from milkshakes and burgers to salads and lean protein. He rode a stationary bike for hours, ran until his body screamed, and swam even though he was terrified of the water. Every day, he pushed himself past the point of exhaustion. His hands bled from pull-ups, his legs cramped from running, his mind begged him to quit, but the mirror kept calling him back. Every time he wanted to stop, he thought of that reflection and reminded himself, I don't want to be that man anymore. And the impossible happened. In just under 3 months, Goggins dropped more than 100 pounds. He went from being a 300-pound exterminator to a man ready to take on Navy SEAL training. That transformation wasn't just physical, it was mental. He proved to himself that the limits he thought were real were nothing more than excuses he had been feeding his mind for years. This part of his story is one of the most powerful because it's not about talent. It's not about luck. It's not even about being born tough. It's about the moment you stop lying to yourself. The moment you face your reflection and admit, I'm not where I want to be. And then, instead of making excuses, you make a choice. That's the real beginning of change. David Goggins didn't just lose weight, he killed the old version of himself, the one who was hiding from life. And that's the challenge for us too. Maybe your version isn't losing 100 pounds in 3 months. Maybe it's breaking a bad habit, chasing a dream you've been too scared to go after, or admitting the truth about why you're stuck. Whatever it is, the first step is the same. Look in the mirror, be brutally honest, and then decide who you're going to become. Because the man David saw in that mirror could have stayed the same forever, but he didn't. He chose to fight, and that choice changed everything. Most people live their entire lives with excuses strapped to their backs like heavy chains. I wasn't born with the right genes. My family was broken. I'm not smart enough. I don't have time. David Goggins had a backpack full of excuses heavier than most. He grew up in a violent home. He struggled in school. He carried trauma and insecurity into adulthood. By his early 20s, he was working as an exterminator, killing cockroaches for a living. His body was soft, his mind was weak, and his dreams were distant ghosts. But there comes a moment when the mirror speaks louder than the excuses. One night, after another day of spraying for pests, Goggins looked at his reflection and saw the truth. He wasn't living. He was wasting oxygen, coasting through life while fear and comfort were suffocating his potential. And in that raw moment of honesty, he realized something powerful. Nobody was coming to save him. Change wasn't going to knock on his door. If he wanted to become the man he dreamed of being, he had to create him. That's when he set his eyes on the impossible, becoming a U.S. Navy SEAL. It sounded insane. At that time, he weighed nearly 300 pounds, had no real discipline, and was terrified of failure. But insanity is often the birthplace of greatness. Goggins started training with whatever he had. He woke up before dawn, ran until his lungs burned, biked for hours, swam even though he hated water. His body fought him every step of the way, but his mind was learning something new. Pain was a teacher, not an enemy. The road wasn't straight. The first time he tried, he failed. He didn't make the weight requirement, didn't meet the standard. Most people would have stopped right there, closed the book, accepted defeat. But Goggins had burned his excuses. He told himself, you can quit now and be nothing, or you can suffer and find out who you really are. So he doubled down. He studied harder, trained longer, cut every ounce of fat off his body, and gave his whole life to this mission. Finally, he was accepted into SEAL training. But making it into the program was only the start of a new kind of hell. Hell Week, the infamous test of pain, exhaustion, and mental torture, nearly broke him. Imagine running on sand with frozen waves crashing against your body. Imagine push-ups and log carries after days without sleep. Imagine instructors screaming at you to quit, daring you to give in. Hundreds of strong men tapped out. Goggins nearly did too. His body was battered, his bones fractured, his soul exhausted. But then he reached into something deeper, the part of the human spirit that refuses to die. He discovered what he later called the 40% rule. When your mind screams that you're done, when your body feels like it's at the edge of collapse, you're actually only at 40% of your true capacity. The remaining 60% is locked behind pain, doubt, but it's real, and it's waiting if you dare to push further. That idea became his weapon. Time and time again, Goggins was knocked down. He failed Bud S training twice due to injuries. Most would have walked away in shame, but Goggins came back again and again. Each failure wasn't a finish line, but a stepping stone. He refused to let defeat define him. Finally, through sheer stubbornness and the willingness to suffer more than anyone else, he made it. David Goggins became a Navy SEAL. That transformation was more than a military title. It was the birth of a new identity. The exterminator who sprayed bugs was gone. In his place stood a man who had proven to himself that pain could be fuel, that excuses were just lies, and that the mind, once unlocked, could drag the body through anything. This stage of Goggins' life teaches us something vital. The path to greatness isn't about talent or luck or waiting for the right conditions. It's about brutally honest self-reflection and the decision to take control of your story. The human mind is designed to protect us from discomfort, but in that protection, it cages us. If you want freedom, if you want to discover who you truly are, you have to step into suffering willingly. David Goggins shows us that transformation doesn't come from comfort. It comes from breaking yourself down over and over until you rebuild into someone stronger. Excuses will always be there, easy to grab, but so will opportunity, the chance to prove to yourself that you're capable of more than you ever imagined. And the truth is, you don't have to dream of being a Navy SEAL to apply this lesson. Whether it's your career, your health, or your relationships, the principle is the same. Stop listening to the voice that tells you not enough. Push beyond the point where you want to quit. Train your mind to fight for the life you want. That's where growth lives. Because at the end of the day, greatness isn't given. It's earned in sweat, in pain, in sacrifice. It's earned when you decide that excuses are no longer your story. That's when change happens. Life has a way of throwing walls in front of us. Sometimes those walls look like fear, sometimes like self-doubt, and sometimes like a million reasons why we can't do something. David Goggins was no stranger to those walls. By this point in his life, he had already pushed past poverty, racism, and an abusive childhood. He had survived Navy SEAL Hell Week, not once, but 3 times. He had carved himself out of stone, body and mind, and proven he could endure more than almost anyone alive. But life wasn't done testing him. It never is. What makes Goggins' story different from just a tale of suffering is how he reframed pain itself. He didn't just learn to endure it, he learned to use it as fuel. He called it the cookie jar. Now, this wasn't the kind of cookie jar filled with sugar and chocolate chips. His cookie jar was filled with moments of victory, memories of times he had pushed through the impossible. Whenever he faced a new challenge, whenever he wanted to quit, he reached back into that jar and pulled out proof that he was stronger than he thought. That's how he kept moving forward when everything in his body screamed to stop. Think about your own life for a moment. You've had hard times too. Maybe not Hell Week, maybe not 100-mile races, but you faced struggles that once felt impossible. And yet, here you are, listening to this story. That means you survived. That means you already have cookies in your jar. The problem is, most people forget their victories. They remember their failures louder. Goggins teaches us to flip that. You remember your strength. You remember the storm you walked through, the times you didn't quit. That becomes your fuel for the next storm. But the journey didn't stop with mental tricks. Goggins kept testing himself, kept finding new ways to prove that the mind has no finish line. He signed up for ultramarathons, races so long and brutal they break most people before they even start. He wasn't running them because he loved running. He actually hated it at first. He ran because he wanted to find that edge where most people break and then step right past it. That's where growth happens, right on the other side of breaking. In one of his most famous challenges, he entered the Badwater 135, one of the toughest foot races on the planet. 135 miles across Death Valley in blistering heat that can fry your skin and melt your spirit. He wasn't prepared in the way most elite runners were. His body was battered, his feet were torn, but his mind was locked in. That's when the lessons of suffering became real. Pain was no longer the enemy, it was his teacher. Every step in agony was another reminder that limits are mostly illusions. Goggins reminds us that greatness doesn't come from comfort. It's not born in a cozy bed or an easy life. Greatness is carved out of discomfort, out of choosing the harder path on purpose. It's forged when you do the thing you don't want to do, when you run the miles after your legs give up, when you study after your brain says, "I'm done," when you keep moving forward even when the world tells you to stop. And here's the raw truth. Most people never taste that greatness, not because they can't, but because they don't want it badly enough. They avoid the pain that builds power. They quit when it gets hard. They live small because small feels safe. Goggins shows us that the bigger life, the stronger life, is waiting just beyond that wall of fear and pain. So here's where his story speaks directly to you. Life isn't asking you to run 100 miles or become a Navy SEAL, but life is asking you to stop underestimating yourself. It's asking you to stop reaching for excuses and start reaching for strength. You've got a cookie jar full of victories. You've got pain that can be transformed into power. The only question is, are you willing to use it? Because if there's one lesson that shines brighter than all the rest, it's this. Your mind is far more powerful than your body. And when your body says, "I'm done," you still have 60% left in the tank. That's the rule Goggins lived by, the 40% rule. The mind quits long before the body actually does. And when you learn to push past that moment, when you tap into the reserve tank inside you, that's when you discover who you really are. This isn't about running. This isn't about pull-ups or military training. This is about life. It's about the next time you want to quit on your dream or on yourself. It's about pushing past the fake finish line your brain draws in the sand. Goggins teaches us that we all have another gear, another level of strength, another version of ourselves waiting on the other side of pain. So, as the story moves forward, remember this: discomfort is not your enemy. It's your doorway. Every time you step into pain, instead of running from it, you're not just surviving, you're becoming. There comes a point in every warrior's life when the battles aren't just outside, but inside your own body. For David Goggins, this stage hit hard. After pushing himself through ultramarathons, brutal Navy SEAL training, and insane physical challenges, his body finally started to give way. He faced broken bones, surgeries, and health issues that would make most people hang up their shoes and say, "That's it, I'm done." But for Goggins, this was just another war. Only this time, the battleground was his own flesh and bones. One of the most haunting moments came when he was diagnosed with a heart condition called an atrial septal defect, a literal hole in his heart that doctors told him had been there his whole life. Imagine that. After years of pushing his body to extremes, after running races that broke even the strongest men, Goggins finds out he's been doing it all with a hole in his heart. Most people would call that bad luck, maybe even a death sentence, but not Goggins. For him, it was just another challenge, another reason to sharpen his mind. He didn't see it as something that weakened him, but as proof of how strong he already was. Then came the injuries. Stress fractures, shin splints, broken bones. His body was screaming at him to quit. Doctors warned him to stop running, to take it easy, to slow down before he caused permanent damage. But here's where Goggins revealed his real philosophy. He believed that suffering was not something to escape, it was something to embrace. He saw suffering as a doorway, a classroom where the toughest lessons of life were taught. And those lessons, once learned, could turn an ordinary person into something extraordinary. Think about how most of us treat pain. We avoid it. We look for comfort. We tell ourselves we'll come back stronger tomorrow. Goggins flipped that on its head. He believed that inside suffering lived the truest version of ourselves. Every setback, every ache, every failure, those weren't signs to stop. They were signals that you were in the right place, that you were about to grow. There's a powerful story in this part of his journey where he's running with broken legs. Yes, you heard that right, running with actual broken bones in his legs. Every step was agony, but instead of backing off, he leaned in. He told himself, this is where most people quit. This is where the weak walk away. But I'm not most people. That mindset wasn't just about finishing a race. It was about proving to himself that he could endure what others couldn't, that his mind was stronger than his body. And here's the thing. Goggins never pretends it was easy. He admits it was hell. He admits there were nights where he cried, days when he doubted himself, mornings when getting out of bed felt impossible. But he also shares that on the other side of that suffering was a power he never knew existed. Pain became his teacher, his guide, his ally. And once he stopped running from it, he realized pain had been shaping him into something greater all along. In today's world, this lesson hits deep. We live in a time where convenience is everywhere. Food delivered in minutes, entertainment at the tap of a screen, instant gratification on demand. But with all that comfort, we're losing our resilience. We forget how to struggle, how to endure. That's why Goggins' story matters so much. He shows us that without struggle, there is no strength. Without pain, there is no growth. Without setbacks, there are no comebacks. By embracing suffering, Goggins discovered a strange kind of freedom. Once you accept that pain is part of the process, it stops controlling you. Once you accept failure as a stepping stone, it stops scaring you. And once you realize that life is not supposed to be easy, you stop wasting energy wishing it was, and instead you use that energy to push forward. Goggins wants us to understand this. Life will break you down. Maybe not in the same ways it broke him, but in your own ways, through heartbreak, loss, failure, rejection, illness, or setbacks you never saw coming. The question isn't whether those moments will happen. The question is, what will you do with them? Will you let them define you, or will you let them refine you? That's why he calls suffering the most powerful teacher. It strips away the lies we tell ourselves. It removes the excuses. It reveals the truth about who we are. And when you come out on the other side, you're not just stronger, you're unstoppable. So as Goggins pushes through these chapters of broken bones, health scares, and devastating injuries, he's not just telling a story of physical endurance. Instead, he's giving us a roadmap. He's saying when life hurts, and it will, don't run from it. Lean into it, embrace it, because inside that suffering is the version of you the world has been waiting to see. And that's where this part leaves us, with a challenge to reframe how we see pain, to stop hiding from the hard parts of life, to see every setback not as the end, but as the beginning of a transformation. Because the truth is, pain doesn't stop you. Quitting does. When you think of human limits, most people imagine some point where the body just can't take anymore. Muscles give out, bones give up, the brain screams stop. But for David Goggins, the end was never the end. In fact, every time his body was screaming, I can't go on, his mind had already made a decision, I will keep going. And this mindset is exactly what carried him into one of the most legendary challenges of his life, the pull-up world record. Now, pull-ups might sound simple compared to running ultramarathons or surviving Navy SEAL Hell Week multiple times. But this challenge was a different beast altogether. To set the record, he had to complete over 4,000 pull-ups in a single day. That's right, not in a week, not in a month, in 24 hours. And what's even crazier is that this wasn't just about breaking a record. For Goggins, it was about proving that the walls we build in our heads are far stronger than the walls that actually exist in the real world. He attempted the record multiple times, and guess what? He failed. Not once, but twice. His hands tore open, the skin ripped off until he was literally holding on to the pull-up bar with raw flesh. Most people would have walked away right there. After all, who could blame him? But David Goggins didn't walk away, because for him, failure wasn't a signal to stop. It was information. It was feedback. It was preparation for the next round. On his third attempt, in front of cameras, lights, and a live audience, he dug deep into that mindset he'd built over a lifetime of suffering. Every rep was agony, every pull felt like ripping his body apart, but every single time he hit the bottom of that bar, his mind reminded him, "You are not done yet." He pushed and pulled until finally, after hours of brutal endurance, he shattered the pull-up world record. It wasn't just a victory for him, it was proof for everyone watching that what you think is impossible is often just the beginning. But here's the real takeaway. The record itself wasn't the prize. The lesson was. What Goggins wanted us to see is that the human spirit is untouchable when it decides to be. Pain can crush the body, doubt can weaken the mind, but purpose, real purpose, keeps you standing, keeps you moving, keeps you climbing. And that's how David Goggins closes out his story. He reminds us that he's not special. He wasn't born tough, wasn't born unbreakable. He was a scared kid, abused, overweight, hiding from the world. But he made a choice, day after day, to live with purpose, to refuse mediocrity, to reject the easy path. He chose the harder road every time because he knew that on the other side of pain is growth, and on the other side of suffering is freedom. This is the message of Can't Hurt Me. Life is going to hit you, and it's going to hit hard. You will fail, you will bleed, you will want to quit, but you don't have to stop. You don't have to surrender. You have more inside you than you've ever imagined, and the only thing standing in your way is the story you keep telling yourself about your limits. So the challenge David Goggins leaves us with is simple but powerful. Stop settling. Stop waiting for the right time. Stop letting fear and doubt be your guide. Instead, chase the thing that scares you. Do the thing you think you can't. Lean into the suffering, because suffering is the doorway to greatness. And remember this, pain is temporary, excuses are forever. But discipline, resilience, and purpose, those will carry you through anything. Goggins proved it with every mile, every rep, every scar, and every broken bone. And now, it's your turn. Because at the end of the day, there's one truth he wants burned into your mind. You can be hurt. You can be broken. But you can never be defeated unless you allow it. So as this book closes, take that message with you. Don't just admire Goggins' story. Live your own. Push past your comfort zone, chase your impossible, and refuse to accept mediocrity. Life will never hand you greatness, but it will always hand you an opportunity to fight for it. And when you choose to fight, you'll discover what Goggins discovered a long time ago, that nothing and no one can hurt you when your mind is unbreakable. At the end of Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins leaves us with something far bigger than a story about running, pull-ups, or Navy SEAL training. What he really gives us is a way to look at life itself. His message is simple, but it hits deep. You don't have to be a prisoner of your past. You don't have to be defined by pain, fear, or even failure. The truth is, your mind has limits only if you let it. And once you understand that suffering is not an enemy but a teacher, you unlock a version of yourself that most people never meet. The biggest takeaway here is ownership. Goggins never sugarcoats it. No one's coming to save you. No one's going to hand you greatness. It's on you. You can't just wait for the right time, the right opportunity, or the right motivation. You have to build yourself day after day. That's what he calls callousing the mind, turning hardship into armor. Every moment of pain is a chance to grow. Every setback is a test, and every test is a step toward becoming the strongest version of yourself. Another powerful lesson is about accountability. Goggins used his accountability mirror, writing down his flaws and facing them head-on every single day. It's brutal honesty, but it's also freedom. Because when you face who you are without excuses, that's when you can start building who you want to be. And the truth is, most people never do that. They live soft lives, trapped in comfort, wishing for change, but never doing the hard work. Goggins shows us the way out of that trap. His final message is about purpose. Records, medals, titles, those things fade. What matters is how you live, how far you push yourself, and whether you refuse to settle for mediocrity. Goggins' life is proof that you can start broken, lost, and beaten down, and still build yourself into something unshakable. The question he leaves us with is, are you willing to suffer, to sacrifice, and to do what others won't, just to find out who you really are? So the takeaway is this: suffering is not the end of the road, it's the path. Discipline is not punishment, it's freedom. And greatness is not about talent, it's about effort, repeated every single day. You are capable of so much more than you think. The only thing standing between you and that next level of life is the story you keep telling yourself. Change that story, take control, and push past the pain. Because on the other side of suffering, you'll meet the real you. And that's what Can't Hurt Me is all about. Not just a book, not just a story, but a challenge. A challenge to stop living easy, to stop hiding from your potential, and to start building the kind of life that when it's all over, you can look back and say, you left nothing behind. Now, if you've connected with this journey, here's one last request. Before you move on, please subscribe to the channel, The Mindful Brief, and hit that like button, because this isn't just content, it's fuel for your growth. Every book, every story we share here is about helping you break limits, discover purpose, and step into the strongest version of yourself. Your life can change from here, but only if you take action. So join us and let's keep going together.